How's it going, YouTube? Got FourthStarTCG here, and today I'd like to do another retrospective video. So about a year ago I made a video on CGC because they were just starting out with grading Pokemon cards. And now it's been a year, and I want to look at the past year for CGC, what they've done, sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's happened with CGC in the past year. And also give a little bit of my perspective on where I see things going in the future. So without any further ado, let's get into the good. What has CGC done good this past year? So I think the first thing that we just have to really praise CGC for is innovation. They have done things that no grading company no Pokemon grading company has really ever done before. The technology that they have started using in their authentication practices allow them to do things like grade very rare and very difficult to authenticate error cards, like the missing holo layer base set to Charizard. I think there might be a couple other missing holo layer base set cards that they authenticated. The Protostoise stuff, I mean, the Protostoise is just so poisoned by what the owners have done with it, but taking them out of it, the card is incredible, incredibly interesting that card is actually real, and CGC being able to go through and authenticate that, match the printing, the ink, the card layers one by one up with authentic cards through technology is just incredible. And to be able to authenticate that and put out a detailed statement of why this card is authentic, big people who have years of experience in Pokemon wouldn't touch those base set 2 cards. They thought they were fake, or at least not confident, because they were missing a holo layer, so they didn't look and feel like any other real Pokemon card. So you can't really fault the people who looked at those cards and said, we're not going to touch them, these don't feel right, these don't look right. But CGC, they went through with their technology and they were able to authenticate those cards, which is really amazing. And to have that option in the trading card hobby, a lot of PSA and BGS, they're very conservative. They won't touch things that don't have a specific provenance, don't have specific documentation, which is good for a lot of things. And I'll get into where CGC's sort of will authenticate anything that's real is not good later on. So, but for things like these base set 2 error cards for the Protostoise, it's great to have a company that is able to go in and willing to go in and do that and say, hey, if it's real, if it matches up with everything that we've seen in the past, we're putting it in a slab, we're authenticating it, we're grading it. So I think that's really great, and we have to praise CGC for that, for being able to develop the technology to do that. It's truly amazing. So that's one great thing that CGC has done. Full praise for that. Sort of in the same vein, full praise to CGC for embracing error cards. PSA, BGS, the sort of standard grading companies we've had, have really not acknowledged error cards. They've even sort of stopped accepting things like no damage Ninetales, no rarity Venusaur and Raichu, just because the numbers didn't match up. It's like very weird things that lead PSA not to grade a card. So it's been strange to have cards like no rarity Venusaur and Raichu and no damage Ninetales not acknowledged by PSA. PSA's getting there. They're doing stuff like 4th print base set now. But CGC really leaning into the error cards. They're not only grading error cards, but they're labeling error cards on the label, so it's clear to see, this is an error card, here's exactly what the error is. And it's good to sort of, it makes all of the like, is my card an error, so easy, because like, okay, just send it to CGC, right? Like, put it in as an error, and if CGC says it's an error, then it's an error, because they've been able to develop this database, which is pretty impressive. Again, so full credit to CGC for that. Another great thing that I think CGC has done is just, in effect, survived for a year and really brought competition to the trading card market, brought diversity to the trading card market, the graded trading card market. It's been a great other option for people. PSA and BGS are currently shut down for most submissions, unless you're paying $200 a card for PSA, or again, something ridiculous for BGS. CGC is still open. And having that option there, if you want to get your cards graded, maybe you're not like some Uber flipper who has to go through PSA, or some crazy investor who's spending $300 a card to grade through PSA because everything has to be PSA. You can go through CGC. And CGC providing that option, providing competition, I think just that has been really, really impressive. And good overall for the trading card hobby. I think CGC has kind of taken some of the heat off of the bigger grading companies with their relatively affordable prices. They've raised them recently, as has every grading company, but what are you going to do? And CGC providing that needed competition that was kind of missing in the trading card market. People have options now for where they want to grade their cards. I say people have options. Well, for bulk, like, CGC is the only option right now. But once everything sort of settles down, might take a while, but once everything settles down, CGC has established itself. And this gets into my final point for what's good about CGC. What CGC has done good over the past year is they really have established themselves. It's not like they are one of the big three now. It's PSA, BGS, and CGC. When you think of big Pokemon grading companies, that's what you think of. And for them to be able to do that just 1 year in the market is very impressive. They're obviously not to the level of BGS or PSA yet. I don't think they will. They'll never get to the level of PSA. I think that's pretty fair to say, just with the decades-long market head start that PSA has. But CGC has really established themselves. People are getting more used to CGC cards. I think a big reason for this is not so much what CGC themselves have done, but just the state of the market in general. As I said, CGC is the only company, the only major grading company open right now. So if you want to get your cards graded, there you go. And that sort of having that restricted choice, especially right now, is leading CGC to become more established. And it's just sort of by necessity, CGC is becoming more established. People are becoming more familiar with CGC graded cards. I'm an eBay seller there in my head. PSA, no. CGC, got to put the PSA in the CGC listing because no one's searching for CGC. But so that's what CGC has done good. And I really want to emphasize that most of this past year has been good for CGC. I think that overall, it's been a very impressive year for CGC. They've done a great job establishing themselves within the market. I think good things are to come with CGC and graded Pokemon cards. And that this is speaking in the whole, like, the company grading cards, not so much the secondary market values of those cards. So now let's talk about the bad. What is the bad that CGC has done in the past year? One thing that I think is quite important here is the turnaround time debacle. When CGC started out, the big thing was like, your bulk turnaround is 30 days, and if you want walkthrough, like 2 days, express 5 days, like they had tip-top turnaround times, and those were advertised like crazy. That, like, because everyone was, even back when CGC started out in, the middle of 2020, people were still like, okay, man, PSA's taken a while, BGS has taken a while to grade my cards. So them advertising 30-day turnaround times was amazing. And they went hard on that. That was one of their big selling points, was get your cards in, we'll get them back to you fast. And that went away in about 2 months. I was skeptical. You know, people were telling me, I think Scott especially was like, they're not going to be able to keep 30 days. I was like, why would they advertise? They go out and crazily advertise 30 days as the bulk turnaround when they're not going to be able to, like, do you have scaling built in? What's your expected demand? Are you, like, this is a major company. Do you really think you're not going to be able to meet that in the near future? But yeah, it was around, Scott was totally right. It was around for like 3 months, and then the turnaround time started ballooning. Now, of course, CGC was still better than PSA at getting your cards returned. There is still, you know, their prices are still lower than PSA, especially for the higher end stuff. But that turnaround time going to upwards of what, 250 plus business days now for a bulk submission. They're back to where PSA is, where it's taking them months to open packages that they've received. It's really sort of like Groundhog Day. We've seen this story before, and CGC was supposed to be different here, and they're not, which is kind of disappointing to you know, have this grading company which started up, and the big thing, like, their major points were, you know, we get your cards back fast and we grade errors. Like, those were their big selling points. But now one of those points is just basically completely gone, because, like, if it's going to take you over 250 business days to bulk grade your cards with CGC, like, I've been talking to a lot of people and they're just saying, you know what, at this point, you know, CGC is costing me with subgrades close to $20 a card in bulk. I'm just going to wait until PSA reopens. It's not worth it at that price point. You know, the attraction of CGC is not there anymore, for a lot of, like, bulk submission type things. So that's not very good with CGC. And as promised, I'm going to get into why grading anything that's real is a bad idea. So because this is CGC's approach, because CGC will grade anything that's real, which is arguably a needed approach within the professional grading marketplace, this leads them to grading some cards that they probably should not touch. So things here include the Shining Fates Charizard VMAX, which was stolen from a printing facility, sold to people here and there, and then made it into a CGC case. I think Rattle did a video on this, but, like, the underlying thing here is that CGC knew that the card was stolen property, and still graded it. And this has happened recently again. There's been a special delivery Charizard which was inadvertently released. Like, things don't get inadvertently released, they get stolen from a printing facility. Like, that's just what happens. Someone sneaks it out in their back pocket and then they try to make a quick buck on the internet. And this happens every now and then. You know, we see it with everything. And that CGC grading these cards is very touchy, because, you know, when you know their approach is grade anything that's real, like, that's one thing. But when you're getting into stolen property and authenticating and putting your name on stolen property, that's just an area that's kind of unpleasant, and you don't really want to get into that. Because then it's sort of like, where's the line with this? And I don't want to get into slippery slope arguments and everything, but if you're grading a Shining Fates Charizard VMAX that's been stolen, you know, would CGC grade another card that's been stolen from someone? You know, is it just cards that are stolen from Pokemon that you can grade? What about cards that are stolen from other collectors? You know, things like this, where it's just like, you really want CGC to put some limits on that "we'll grade anything that's real" thing, especially if they know it's stolen property. You know, when the Shining Fates Charizard VMAX sort of, I don't even want to call it a scandal, it was just like people being like, oh, I don't know about that, when that broke. there were emails that came out and DMs where like CGC clearly knew that this card was not legally obtained and they were still grading it, and it was just like, really, that's kind of like, you get the policy, right? If the policy is grade anything that's real, that makes sense that they'll touch that. But it's just something that I think a major company should not be doing, especially if they want to maintain their standing within the hobby. So we've done the good, we've done the bad. Now I want to get into the ugly with CGC. And I think the ugly with CGC is just a lot of what I would call unforced errors, where it's things that if they had been a little more sort of strict with their employees, if they had done some more research, then things would have been done differently. And sort of the main thing I'm talking about here is the astroturfing on E4. And if you're not familiar with this, I'll just give you a quick rundown of what happened. So astroturfing is when there are inorganic posts about a company made by people who have a financial relationship or a interested relationship with that company, and they're made to appear as if they're grassroots people. So imagine you go on your local Facebook page and someone's posting about how great the local, Walmart is, how great their customer service is. And you think, wow, that's pretty nice. They're in my community, they're like me, and they're saying that this Walmart has great customer service. Well, I think I'll go and buy stuff from that Walmart, thinking they have great customer service. Well, what happens when you find out that the person who made that post on your local Facebook page isn't a soccer mom who went shopping there, but is a fake account made by a executive at that Walmart trying to drum up extra sales for them? That's what astroturfing is, and it's illegal. You can't do it. It's against the law. So what happened on E4 was we had people who were employed by CGC, who were posting about CGC. They were saying good things about CGC. They were saying bad things about CGC's competitors on E4. And these accounts that were posting these things, they didn't disclose that they were employees of CGC. They were just sort of posting on their own. And not only were they posting good things about CGC and bad things about CGC's competitors, they were doing it from CGC's headquarters, like on their work computers. So this is illegal, like against the law. You cannot do this. It's against CGC's policy. So I just want to be very clear when I say this, that I don't think this was like the head of CGC telling the employees, go and talk up CGC and talk down CGC's opponents on this random internet forum. I don't think that happened. I don't think this was intentional. I think it was just a couple employees who were a little overzealous and overeager about their jobs, and who were proud of the company that they work for. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but when it strays into illegal activity and posting about your company, lauding them on an internet forum without disclosing that that's happening. And it wasn't just, it was like people who are relatively high up in the CGC trading cards division. So stuff like that, these unforced errors, and I'd kind of lump the grading stolen property thing in with these unforced errors, where if people had just taken a step back and saying, okay, is this the right idea? Like, let me just make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing here, because this damaged the standing of CGC with a lot of people. So things like that, they happen with the evolution of a new company. And again, I think that the majority of what CGC has done over the past year has been very good. So in the future, where do I see CGC going? And this is sort of not so much, again, it's not about like the secondary market value of their cards. It's not about like the specific, their grading scale or whatever. It's just the general placement of them in the graded trading card marketplace. And I think they're really well positioned. I think the longer the PSA and BGS shutdown goes on, the more established CGC will become basically by default, because what else are you going to do? Are you going to pay $200 to grade your cards with PSA? You know, I have maybe 4 cards that I'd pay $200 to grade right now, and that's about it. So, you know, people who want their cards graded by a reputable, not one of these basement companies, they're going to go to CGC. And over time, as more people become familiar with CGC, that's going to increase their reputation. And that's the big thing in the graded trading card marketplace, is your reputation. So there have been some incidents over the past year that have kind of diminished that reputation, but as long as CGC just doesn't do any more unforced errors, just keeps on the sort of straight and narrow with what they've been doing, you know, they make great contributions to the graded trading card marketplace. So I'm really excited to see where it goes in the future. And I think they will become more established, sort of directly proportionate with the length of the shutdown at PSA and arguably PSA's prices when they reopen. But, you know, there are some risks, especially if things like a significant decrease in graded Pokemon card prices happen. You know, tons of people have been grading their cards. Law of supply and demand says more supply and not increasing demand means prices go down. So if PSA really starts cranking out those cards, CGC starts cranking out those bulk submissions from, you know, January, February, when people were really going crazy with their graded card submissions, that might sort of work to CGC's detriment, just because if the graded secondary market prices aren't there, then there isn't a whole lot of incentive for people to submit, except people who are going for, you know, collection goals and stuff. But a lot of those people have been going for collection goals. They're with PSA, they're not with CGC. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next year proceeds for CGC. But I hope this video has been informative and helpful. Again, overall, I think CGC has done pretty well over the past year. So thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stick around for more videos.